We're coming, and we ain't backing down.
We don't need a bunch of cats in here looking in the mirror.
Everybody just do your job. You understand that?
Hey, will you shut up?
I'm bitterly disappointed with the officiating today.
Guys being dudes.
And they run through our like through a tin horn, man.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Joel Anderson. The Ringer Tailgates, Joel Anderson. The Press Box Pods, Joel Anderson as well. I think this makes you a first-time, long-time, if I am not mistaken here.
Well, so it depends on what you mean by that, because when we were in Atlanta, I did the live show with you guys and Spencer and Holly and all and that crew. So so this is my first time on the show, which is great because I've listened to y'all since the beginning. I'm a subscriber, you know what I'm saying? So I'm honored that you all would have me on.
Real deal in the field, Joel Anderson. And honestly, this is a conversation that I know that you have had for a while and something that you've written on for a while. You are new to this, you are true to this, not new to this as far as this is concerned. And you are real in the field. Just for the uninitiated, to bring our listeners kind of into the mix, the Supreme Court in late April struck down Louisiana's voting map, finding that lawmakers had illegally used race when drawing up a new majority black district. It is another in a series of effective weakenings of the Voting Rights Act. Joel has done a tremendous podcast on Clarence Thomas, for instance. Joel has gone deep in the Voting Rights Act, our current moment, where as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, and all this kind of stuff. So in light of that, and in light of what the NAACP released earlier last week at this point in time, when you listen to this and watch this, I wanted to bring Joel on and talk about this under the guise of, frankly, the title of this episode: should black athletes boycott SEC schools? And I want to kind of take this in a few different directions. The first direction, and one that I think is interesting for our listeners, is this specifically is a conversation that we don't have around white people. And it's specifically, should you go to a PWI, primarily white institution, or should you go to an HBCU? Neither Joel or I went to an HBCU. I went to the University of Florida. Joel played football at TCU, obviously went to Texas Christian. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of it, that conversation specifically, because it's something that I don't want to say wrestle with, because I don't make any bones about going to the school that I went to. If I had to do it again, I'd do it again the way I did it. Sure. I could have gone to Florida A&M. I could have gone to Bethune. I could have gone to HBCUs in the state of Florida, but I didn't and wouldn't if you gave me the other option. But where are you on that, as you're farther removed from college, raising a child in your own right, kind of trying to make that decision and in probably a decade or so, really truly make that decision?
Well, I'm a product of HBCUs. My parents actually met at the Arkansas A&M, which is now called UAPB, University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. And I grew up around HBCUs. Houston had Texas Southern University. I went to Prairie View games. I went to TSU games. I went to those games before I went to University of Houston games as a kid. And so I've always been part of the HBCU family and considered myself part of it. And I wanted to go to HBCUs out of high school. It just didn't happen that way, right? Like, I had to make another decision. But I've always stayed close and always held them top of mind. I'm always worried about them because, the best way to say this is that we have abandoned HBCUs in a lot of ways. Like PWIs and everybody else have just skimmed off the best students, the best athletic talent. And HBCUs now have a very different mission than they used to before. Like, right there, they still are producing the largest portion of the Black middle class and Black working class. So they need to be healthy, right? And so that's what I think about with HBCUs. Like, I don't begrudge any kid that says, look, I don't want to go to Bethune-Cookman. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to go to Alabama A&M. But a lot of kids either don't have that option, or they're going to, they've got fewer options, and that seems like the best one. So I think they need to be healthy, and I would like to see them treated better. I don't even know if you remember, a few years ago, there was a group of folks led by David West, the former basketball player, that was trying, before NIL broke through and everything, he was trying to organize HBCUs into being the league that paid athletes, and people would go there, and it just kind of fell apart because, inertia and everything else. But yeah, man, I'm down with the HBCUs, man. I want to see them thrive. And I think, like, especially right now when, these states and universities are, I mean, any moderately qualified Black person is suspect. You're a DEI hire, you're low IQ, you don't belong in these places. And so, as always, HBCUs are going to be there for us, hopefully.
I think there's a tension there, especially for someone like me I grew up as a middle-class Black kid. I didn't grow up like you did in the HBCU environment. I had an aunt who taught at FAMU. I've been to a couple FAMU games. I've been on campus with her. I had been around it, not to your degree at all, but I had been around it a little bit. And it's just something that I never really even considered, to be honest with you.
Okay.
But I do think there is a tension in there, and I think it lies in sort of how you grew up and what you want for your college experience, and frankly, your comfortability in a white space. I have always personally been very comfortable in white spaces. That's just how I grew up. That's kind of how I operate. And so because of that, it wasn't even a leap and a bound to go to the University of Florida. You know what I mean? And for professional reasons, it ended up bearing fruit, I should say. I grew up a Florida fan. I grew up going to Florida games. So it was everything that I knew. It was everything that I wanted. But I do think there is a tension. And I do think as years go by in our political climate, which wasn't the way it was when I was graduating high school, it was about to be, but it wasn't specifically.
You got the heat, you got the hot years. You definitely
exactly. I do think that's in there. And I do think that when you talk about weakening HBCUs, that is interesting, because I think that in a way, frankly, integration started the process. Right. And then we go throughout the years and you're just pulling different pegs out and you're lessening funding and you're doing all these different things over the years to get HBCUs to where they are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the most important thing for people that don't know a lot about HBCUs is that they've always been underfunded, and there's been lawsuits and collective action that has been across basically most of the states in the South about how they've been denied their fair share of their resources. So they're withering on the vine in some ways, and in some places, like in Florida, Ron DeSantis has been able to like load up the board of trustees with cronies and even appoint a person that's like politically friendly to him as the president of the school. And so like HBCUs aren't even in states like that. Even their ability to govern themselves is sort of in peril. But I was thinking about what you said, Richard, about your ability to be in integrated spaces. I'm older than you. I'm so much older than you. Right. And so like, I mean, dog, the Civil Rights Act, all this shit, this is like 10 years before I was born. So, I mean, I literally, the first person in my family to go to high school with white people. Right. And so, the community was more robust at once upon a time. Right. Like I grew up in a Black neighborhood, a Black middle class neighborhood in Houston. And, the local high school, Willow Ridge High School, which has produced Thurman Thomas and some other people, their high school basically took on the characteristics of an HBCU. Like their band did all that, whatever you see Grambling and Southern do. They were invited to the Rose Bowl one year to perform there. So like I had to, even when I went to school, I came back into my community and I didn't have the same comfort level with white folks, even though I had to go to school with them. I didn't have the same comfort level you did. You grew up later than me. The integration had had been going on for another, how much younger than me are you, man?
I was born in 1993.
All right, man. All right. I'm 47, about to turn 48. Okay. So this is a real generational divide thing. And I think that's, when we can get into this later, I think that is one of the challenges of collective action with this stuff, because community doesn't quite mean the same thing that it did to me. Like I grew up in a totally different time with parents that, had a different experience than parents that were probably your parents' age. Right. And so, I understand why people are a little skeptical of this because it's not necessarily the same. The communities are not quite the same. We're a little bit more fractured than we used to be. And I understand that. I understand that all of this is a difficult ask and difficult to consider because this does not necessarily the same familiarity of communities that it used to be.
Yeah, and we will get to that in a second, but I do. The other piece of it is my parents aren't American. My parents are both immigrants.
See?
And so, there's also that aspect to it that goes into it.
That's right.
It's just an interesting.
Yeah, my parents grew up in the Jim Crow South, Jim Crow, Arkansas, right? And Jim Crow, Louisiana, and Jim Crow, Arkansas. And yeah, man. So I mean, just imagine like the lessons that I learned from them. Fresh out of the reason my mother was originally going to move to Oakland, like a lot of Black people were doing during the Great Migration, and I guess her older sister who had moved out there did not send for her, so she did not go. So she went to Arkansas, but she said she had to get out of Arkansas. Arkansas was a really bad place. And so I said, well, why did we go to Houston? Like, if you did not like Jim Crow, did not like the South like that, why are we in Houston? And she said, well, to be honest, Houston was as far north as you could get south, right? And so like even those kind of choices, the choices that were circumscribed to her were just totally different than like your folks who, immigrated here and at a different thing. So we've all got a different perspective on this stuff. And I think it's age and like to be frank, like what the fuck our families did and where they came from.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of set the table there because I think it informs how both of us come at something that frankly we disagree on, which is, and this is earlier this week, the NAACP released its Out of Bounds campaign targeting the flagship universities of Tennessee, Louisiana, Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, South Carolina, Texas, and Georgia. There are 3 prongs to this campaign that the NAACP released. Basically, prong 1, they are asking Black athletes and recruits to withhold commitments from targeted programs, to ask coaches and athletic directors where their universities stand on voting rights, and to visit and seriously consider HBCUs. The second prong, current college athletes are being asked to use their platforms to elevate the issue, to ask institutional leaderships for public statements opposing racial vote dilution, and to consider all available options under the transfer portal. And the third prong, fans, alumni, donors, and consumers are asked to stop purchasing tickets, merchandise, and license apparel from targeted programs and to direct that funding to HBCUs, their athletic programs, scholarship funds, NIL collectives, blah, blah, blah. I kind of want to do those in reverse.
Okay.
Because I think the third one's the easiest one. The third one is basically stop buying merch, fans, stop buying tickets, stop donating. That's, I think, the lightest lift if I go through them.
I think so, absolutely. And again, I wonder if this is a generational thing. And the way I'm going to say it is this. It wasn't until I got older and moved around a lot and I started getting familiar with all these other college campuses. And like I covered, go to a game day in Ann Arbor or a game day in Athens or whatever, and you get familiar with it. And you're like, oh, I'll get a little shirt from there. But man, when I was growing up, man, brothers did not wear no University of Texas shit. You know what I'm saying? Like they just did not. Like it was not it's not that we hated it or anything. I did. They didn't. But it just was like I would never wear an LSU shirt in public anyway, right? So that's sort of a new thing. But yeah, I mean, like I think of all the asks, like you said, that seems to be the easiest one. And I think if you're not inclined to do that, then you're probably not going to be inclined to do anything else or participate with this. But I mean, really, do you have to have a University of Georgia, quarter zip? I don't think you do. Yeah, another one. Yeah, I don't think you need one.
And it's interesting you kind of bring that up because I remember Marcus Spears talked about this in his recruitment to LSU. He was like, the first time I stepped on LSU's campus was when Nick Saban called me.
Yep.
I went to Southern games.
Yep.
I went to, that was I don't want to say side of the tracks, but that's the Baton Rouge that Marcus Spears grew up in. And he went to University Lab High School.
Yep.
So it's you can be in such close proximity. Look, Bobby Bowden for years and Jimbo recruited to Florida State off of FAMU's right down the road.
That's right. Exactly.
And they're certainly not the only that did that.
You can party right over here, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like if you have any concerns, Go right across the street, and fam is right there. Yeah, I mean, it was very effective. It was a very effective recruiting tactic. By the way.
Yeah. I do wonder, one of the things they don't, and this is specifically crafted in that third prong there, they didn't talk, about if they do mention scholarships funds, but let's say I wanted to donate to the Black Student Union at TCU for you or University of Florida for me. That's obviously carefully worded in legalese, but it's not in there. But what they do want is the pulling of merch and all that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, I think if you want to talk about lifts as far as they're concerned, yeah, that's probably the lightest lift. But this second one, the current college athletes asked to use their platforms to elevate the issue. Okay. Couple prongs here.
Okay.
Or a couple of issues or ways I want to take it. Let's start here. Is it, maybe fair is not the right word. Do you or I really expect today's college athlete to be versed in this specific issue? I think that some of it is not their fault.
Right.
When you consider how news is consumed, or lack thereof, consumed. When you think about how news is disseminated. When you think about, and I know this is the point, when you think about the flood the zone strategy of the administration, of everything that they've wanted to do across two administrations. That's the point, but that is still the truth. I guess the question is it fair to expect today's college athlete to be versed in, and this is a downstream inside baseball issue. This is not George Floyd being murdered. This is not pick one. This is, voting rights and legislation and gerrymandering districts.
Right. I mean, I think part of the problem is that we don't have that expectation for athletes anymore. We used to. We used to say, hey, man, you're 18, 19 years old. You're old enough to attend the Cleveland Summit, the legendary summit in 1968 that had Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was then a college student, and they boycotted the 68 Olympics, right? They were asking people to do that then. We don't ask that anymore. And there's reasons for that. But I think it goes back to what I was talking about, like the generational difference. A lot of these kids they're not part of the community anymore. And that's not their fault. Like a lot of kids, they're pipelined. Like they identify them very early. They work with trainers and coaches, and they go to schools that are not necessarily in their neighborhoods anymore, where they grew up, or maybe they stay with some sort of, family that is sponsoring them or whatever. And so they're sort of out of touch with the community anyway. And so it never comes up. And there's never nobody ever asked them to make that sort of a sacrifice. So whereas I want them to do this, I would love it. I mean, I think they've got power. I think you think Ohio State would be pissed if Jeremiah Smith start talking about this shit? I don't think so. Not at all. Like, they still going to give him his money. They still going to try to get him the ball. But I think that and it's a collective failure, the athletes and the young people of today, young Black kids of today, don't have that kind of political education that was necessary for people my age or older, right? We don't make that expectation of them anymore. And I think that part of it is that we've got to start. We've got to start somewhere. And I think this is part of that. Get familiar with it. It's not that hard to read. You're in school. You're 18 years old. We can treat you I do call them kids. And sometimes, I know what it was like to be 18, 19, 20, 21. That is not a full-grown adult, but you are a full-grown adult. And I think it's okay to ask them to, hey, man, just study up on this. See what you think. What are your thoughts on it? Get them up to speed and have opinions about the world around you. Because I tell you what, their colleagues in school, the frat kids, the kids in sororities, the legacy babies, all that kind of stuff, they're getting that education one way or another. And so you don't want to be 35 and late to the game, I would think, if I were them.
I would argue they don't. I would argue that because of the status quo-ness of, as someone so I was in a predominantly white fraternity. I was in Kent State when I was in college.
Yeah.
The way you fly through, especially now, even younger than me, the way you fly through the way you fly through college, you just don't have to interface with those kinds of things. And then it's kind of a joke, but you talk about they can all read, man, they're all throwing shit through ChatGPT. I
Yeah,
have my
that's a
doubts
fair
about
point. Yeah, that's a fair point.
I have my doubts
Yeah, I
about
mean, I
whether they
don't
can
know.
read or
Yeah,
not.
I don't know what kind of education this is anymore. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
And again, and then you talk about what education specifically they are getting, which I know, again, part of the point. And so you have to, and Bomani talked about this when you two talked about this. Whoever we is, have to instruct these kids person to person because our education system isn't doing it. And again, that's the point. But our education system isn't doing it. And then you layer on, and I'm glad you took it there, the lone wolf relative nature of the athlete right now. The athlete that if you went to IMG, for instance,
oh man,
you play at IMG, and this is just football players. Football player, you go down to IMG, you're wherever you are away from home. You don't, in that community, you don't graduate high school with everybody. You leave high school in January, if you're a top recruit, to go to college. And you also have other people trying to steer you.
Yep.
Differently and more than just parents. And it's agents, it's managers, it's what have you. That's another consideration. If I went to my agent and said, hey, I'd like to do this, I'd like to boycott, like your agent's probably going to get in your ears. Some of them are probably going to get in your ear and say, we're not doing that. We're not messing the money up. And it's the money piece that I think makes things so different, because Joel, when I hear current college athletes are asked to use their platform to elevate the issue, maybe it's a cynical thought from me, but I think you're going to have to give them a little NIL for that. That's just,
I mean, see, the interesting thing about this is that if they had their political education, do you know why they took the SCORE Act off the I guess they retracted. Yeah, they took it back.
the
Whatever.
Congressional Black Caucus stood up.
The Congressional Black Caucus stood up for them. Even if people don't think that people are doing things for them and looking out for them, people are. The same people that are being maligned as being unfamiliar with the issues and everything else and asking these kids to do things they would not do for themselves. They're out there advocating for them, and I don't know if they know that. Because I haven't heard a lot of people talk about that.
I think a lot of them, frankly, don't. Because if let's say I'm not in South Carolina, what the hell do I know about a Jim Clyburn?
Yeah. I mean, man,
that's just saying that to the two of us, saying that is crazy.
Yeah,
and it's hard to square. It's hard to just feel, frankly, as a truth.
Well, I think the thing is, to your point, like if you go to IMG, people have worked really, really hard to make those kids feel like their family, their community is football and not their neighborhood, right? And so when you were talking about, you mentioned like, talking about who is we? I don't know if they necessarily see themselves as we in the same way that I did, right? And so the political training, the social training, the cultural training starts so fast, and it's part of the NIL thing. Man, look, my cousin was just here a week ago. She is the stepmother to a 15-year-old kid in San Antonio who wants to play college football. It's pretty good. He may end up somewhere, he may not. We'll see. But they're paying for a service right now that teaches you how to tweet and do your workouts and all this other stuff and like how to promote yourself. Bro, I already know that that's one of the things that they would say, you probably don't want to do that if you want to get a scholarship or you want these coaches to look at them. And I think that probably is true.
It's all about brand. It's all about brand safe and all that stuff.
But man, I just think, I mean, if you look at the people who stand the test of time, the people who are ultimately remembered, the people who become big personalities, it's the people that speak up, man, and say things that aren't necessarily popular. You know what I mean? Like Tiki Barber got his opportunities, for being, mainstream guy, but like what happened, when people figured out there was nothing else there. And I think that that's a part of it, man. I just think that, you'll get what you get, that's fine. You don't have to say anything. And these are the important thing to remember. These are asks, not demands. Right. But, you can do that. Keep your head down, try to work the system, make your money. That's great. That's fine. But you're going to have to come back out into the world someday. The world's still going to hit you, bro. Like, I don't know how, unless you end up making, Lamar Jackson money or something, you're going to have to come back out into this world, and you're going to need things, and you're going to want to build community. And, I hope the University of Georgia, I hope the University of Tennessee is looking out for you, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think that a lot of them think, and maybe I am putting words in people's mouths here, but I think a lot of them think they live a post-racial existence.
Oof.
Or I sense that's a sense that I get from a lot of them, because like 2020 was what it was, and then that kind of that when you look back on it in the grand scheme, that was unfortunately that was a fad. Sorry to say.
No,
that was a popular moment.
Do you know what? And also what happened is that there was an active and potentially robust protest movement attached to it. And then what happened was that a group of athletes, including, Trevor Lawrence, Caleb Williams, the message became, we want to play.
Right. They it was going on one line, and I was like, oh, all right, we got something. And then, and then it like really got crossed over there. Yes.
Yeah. They co-opted that movement real quick. And so again, it's really, really tough. I mean, it's tough to get a kid 18 and 19 years old. This all has to start when you're like 8 or 9 years old, right? Like you got to start caring then. And so again, these asks they're maybe big for kids today, but they may not be for kids 5-10 years from now.
This takes me to where I wanted to go here at one point in time, which is, do you think Boycott has had the steam taken out of it? Because I personally do. Okay. I think that Boycott is supposed to be an escalation, right? Mm-hmm. I think that as someone who worked in organizing an organized labor movement at Vox Media, for instance, you don't start with strike.
Right.
You don't even start with Wildcat strike.
Right.
You don't even start with one-day walkout. you build up to these things. And so when you come out and it says boycott on the headline of the release, to me, is it too drastic? To me, it is too drastic of an action to be the first thing that somebody that a 19-year-old interfaces with. But then I also understand that we don't have them for 10 years in college athletics. Mm-hmm. They're here for 3, 4, or granted, some of them are here for what's
6, 7, 8 years. Yeah, right. You know what I'm saying? Diego Pavi, what's up?
They move on too quickly for us to stair step an escalation.
Right. I mean, I do think that is true. And I also think, look, that it is an escalation, but I don't know what else they could do. And also I would say I've not seen that release, right? But on NAACP's website itself, which about the out of bounds campaign, which is what this is all looped to, they don't use the words boycott. Okay. And so, I mean, I think you could, some people might use the word boycott. I might say, I just don't fuck with y'all right now. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it doesn't have to be a collective action. And I mean, the thing is that we already know that there's not going to be that much collective action. Like there's not going to be a movement of 3,000 or 4,000 athletes that do this and cause that sort of chaos. The issue is, can you get 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, 10? Can you get, what if Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese had said, man, we're not playing unless, ABC, right? I'm not naive enough to think that would change the whole world, that they have the power of the world in their hands. But I would actually say to you, Richard, that boycotts actually do work. Like I've seen them work. Like, I mean, the history of them up through the 60s and 70s, of course. But man, I was at Columbia, Missouri in 2015. Okay. And what those kids did when they threatened to boycott a game, and it got the president and chancellor run up out of there. And at the end of the year, Gary Pinkel resigned. Now, he had health issues and everything else, but I don't know if he would have done that. Now, again, it doesn't always work. I don't think the expectation is that it would. It's the tip of the spear. But this is just the first of many, many actions, the first of many, many things that are happening. And I don't think a boycott is an escalation, but I mean, so is just decimating the Voting Rights Act
Mm-hmm.
and not saying shit about it. Like, see, that's the other thing, because we were talking about, like, you know, black folks and talking about HBCUs and PWIs. Man, it's just really sad to me that we have no expectations of our white brothers and sisters in this. Like, we don't ask them for anything, and they'll never have to say anything, even if they silently agree or whatever. The thing is, I can never assume what they think about any of this stuff. But it just would be nice if once in a while, a white athlete, a white coach, a white agent, a white athletic director said, yeah, this is wrong. And I can't, speak to whether or not these kids should boycott or not. But if they do, I support them.
And frankly, you did get at least a version of that in 2020, whether they believed it or not, whether you would. They did.
They had Lane Kiffin, Bob Stoops, Nick Saban, all of them out there in the streets. Yeah. They had all of them out there in the streets, man. That's how serious it was to them. And the threat of discontent among their labor force inspired them to get their ass out in the streets. It inspired Jerry Jones once upon a time to take a knee. Take a knee. Yeah. It's hard, but I mean, how many times you think Jerry Jones got on his knee for something? You know what I mean? So I do think that boycott still carries a very powerful threat. And I think that that's necessary right now because they're tearing up maps and throwing away votes as we speak.
I do think it is. The one part where I think it is fair is, especially if you are at a school, to push on athletic director, to push on coach, to push on that's where, if you are versed enough in the issue, you get a group of you, 3, 4, 5 in the locker room. That's where I think, all right, I think that's a reasonable ask. Now that takes a level of education of the issue, and you don't have to get deep into packing and cracking and all this type of stuff. But I do think there can be something of a push there. I think that's in bounds. I think that's a, I don't want to say a low risk. But like, they're not going to kick you off the team. You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to happen. But the third prong, just to call it out, black athletes and recruits are asked to withhold commitments from targeted programs, to ask coaches and athletic directors where their universities stand on voting rights, and to visit and seriously consider HBCUs. Obviously, the second part of that we just talked about, I think is worthwhile, is doable, frankly. The visit and seriously consider HBCUs. Interesting. Think it's possible there, but at what point in time, and then this goes to the strata of the athlete himself, because if I'm, I don't want to get this into a Travis Hunter Shador end of the conversation, but there is that type of athlete that interfaces with an HBCU in the way that the two of them and Dion interfaced with Jackson State, which is probably another podcast for another day.
That's real shit. Yeah.
But you have that with the, and this is a kind of a Twitter brain thing, like, well, all the 5-star athletes should just go to Howard versus Maryland or wherever. Like, it just, God love it, that's not happening.
I've never necessarily been that much of a fan of that particular line of thinking because, first of all, I don't think HBCUs are there for that. Like, I just don't, like, they have a totally different mission. They serve a totally different student and athlete base. I don't think it matters if they get good at sports or not. Like, I don't really particularly care how good Prairie View is. And also, the reality is, if that happened, those state legislatures would hurt HBCUs.
Oh, yeah.
They would fuck them up. There's no way they would let Florida A&M be good and Florida State not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If that was something going on. So they would make it difficult. And it's, again, I mean, look, man, another boycott that I covered was the 2013 one in Grambling, right? I saw it what the facilities were, and I've seen it in several other HBCUs. It's tough. It's a tough ass. They don't have all the resources, even compared to other FCS schools. So it's funny that of all of them, that's the one I'm the most skeptical of, because I just think that one, maybe it's because of my affinity for HBCUs and the students that go there, that I'm just like, we don't have to use them as a bargaining chip. But I get why people go there.
Yeah. And the recruits, the withholding commitments is where you get into a level of ask that I fear is unreasonable. And look, I get it. Hard things are hard. Yeah. And that's part of the point. from the NAACP's standpoint or any activist standpoint.
Mhm.
But I think when you're talking about asking a 17-year-old to withhold a commitment and the pressure that comes with that to a school that they want to go, or they're worried about, hey man, that spot's gone if
Mhm.
I don't commit, for instance.
Mm.
You know, there's a level of athlete that you talk about. All right, well, if Jeremiah Smith said, I'm not going to Ohio State, but I am going to Miami, which frankly almost happened,
Mhm.
you could get some action at Ohio State, for instance, for whatever it is Jeremiah Smith wanted to. But when you go 100 levels down the chart of Jeremiah Smith's, there is a we will move on without you
Yeah.
scenario. And then you add in the dynamics of potential rev share contract negotiation that are also in there for a 17-year-old.
Oh yeah, I mean the reality is I would love it if all the athletes would be like, I'm not going there because they're racist as shit, right? That would be fantastic. Like the 3 and 2 stars of them, I know that they have very limited bargaining power in these situations, and they kind of got to go where the opportunities are, where the money is. But for the 5 stars and maybe high 4 stars, the ones that are really coveted, the ones that have 30, 40 offers. They can kind of go wherever they want to go, man. I think that is a totally reasonable ask. Now, again, do I think it's likely? No, not right now. But because we haven't engaged those kids the way we should, they don't have like as I mentioned, the political education, and like there's more organizing to be done. But eventually, I wouldn't mind seeing 5 stars saying, "I'm not going to that school." And I mean, man, look. Lane Kiffin said it himself. Sometimes they already would kind of doing that shit on the low. They're like, I can't go to Ole Miss, coach. It's racist down there. That's what we thought in Texas, believe it or not. Texas, we thought Mississippi's were too racist, right? Like you can't go over there, it's too racist. But people think that already. And in some ways it has worked like that. When I was up at Missouri and I talked to some St. Louis AM radio guys, and they were like, yo, we were actively encouraging kids to not go to Mizzou, right? And you could do that. That's all. It's always happened. It's going on. Maybe not as much as it used to, but there's always been sort of that reticence. So like organizing it and being strategic about which athletes are going to, have a condition for that. I think that would be smart. I think that's the most likely path to getting something done.
This is a question that I think it's probably going to sound crazy to you, and because someone asked it of me, and I really said, "Damn, that's crazy," and then I said, "Huh, you're right." Like, what is the role of the NAACP in 2026? Because the person that I was having this conversation with asked me, "When's the last time you thought of the NAACP?"
Yeah,
and I was like, "You know what I'm saying?" Like, I was like, before they put out this announcement earlier last week.
Well, see, I think that's always a thing because I mean, Bomani is very is skeptical of the NAACP as well. And what I would say is that when things go wrong in Dothan, Alabama, when things go wrong in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, when things go wrong in Albuquerque, New Mexico, their local NAACP chapter is usually with the black folks engaged. If it's some sort of racist shit, like so, if it's in Texas, for instance, and there's a kid who there's a dispute over whether or not he can wear his hairstyle in school or he's not going to be suspended from school, people usually reach out to their local NAACP chapter and they connect them with people. They're a connecting organization. It doesn't have the same role that it used to. I mean, it just doesn't. I mean, that's for a lot of reasons, but I also think people undersell like what the NAACP means for people in places that don't have access to, large platforms or can't reach out to somebody's, daddy or whatever. Like, I mean, I think like for Bomani, the NAACP is not a factor. He might never need them. They may ask, the NAACP is more likely to ask Bomani to do something, right? Like, can you come here and do this or whatever? But for the people that live in, small town America, the black folks that live there, the NAACP is often a lifeline and they're fighting and doing stuff. And particularly the Legal Defense Fund, they're doing fights on behalf of us for school segregation, the prison, the school to prison pipeline, all that stuff. They're working on all that stuff on our behalf. Just because our media doesn't always put it on the headlines or whatever, doesn't mean that action's not going on.
Yeah, and I think that's that's an important point that I think that sometimes I even miss. Just because you're not hearing from them doesn't mean it's not working. And I think that regrettably, unfortunately, the attention economy nature of our lives right now do not lend itself to slow and steady and incremental and all that sort of stuff. However, banishing a voting map in Louisiana, that didn't happen overnight.
No, absolutely.
Now, it may seem like it.
They slowly eroded those
Right.
those rights. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
These things slowly get eroded, and action is. And so when I think that, and I don't know the steps that the NAACP has taken to get to this announcement or this release, what have you, that they put out the other day. But yes, that notion of like they may not grab your attention until they do something like this, which is its own treatise on how everybody consumed news, but specifically young people, and how it didn't come up on your radar until it does, and now it is, and it's, how do you square that when you're 19?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. I mean, the funny thing is too is it's like I can only imagine the NAACP. You know, they're working to connect people with attorneys. They're working on voting rights legislation in individual states. They're doing all this really important shit every day, man, like in Flint, you know, with the water situation or whatever. And the only way they could get attention was college football, which to me suggests that college football is unique and it has a particular place in the American culture, and that we can leverage that in some sort of way, because they don't, you're right. People don't give a shit about the NAACP releases for the most part. People that news reporters don't often show up to their press conferences, but they did for this because it was college football.
Right.
Oh yeah. Also, I had this idea. So I read this, and I don't want to steal the brother's idea. Alvin Tillery. He wrote a Substack about this stuff, and he came up with a plan. And one of his plans was one of his, you know, for punishing these southern states for doing voting rights is a racism tax. So basically, athletes go to those schools and say, you know, if you, South Carolina, and say, you know, coach, I like South Carolina, but it's so racist here. I don't know if I could play here. I'm gonna need another $500,000, right? And I was like, that's interesting. But again, it requires a political education of the students.
Right.
You got in the athletes. You got to engage them so much younger than this. And so, that's the issue, is that we don't have a lot of time, but we're going to need time.
Yeah. And I like the other thing, and this is kind of the last thing that I have on this, is I don't even know if it's a fine line, but there is a line between how people think about the South overall in general.
Yeah.
And I bristle at when people treat the South as a lost cause. I'm not talking about lost cause-ism, Civil War. I'm not talking about that. Yeah. I'm talking about when they literally treat the South as too far gone, yada, 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 whatever, because frankly, you keep doing that and you continue to create the conditions for the last 10 years of your life, or at least your political life, which is a different story. But that's the other thing. When I hear don't go to Georgia, just go to Ohio State or whatever, pick school. It ain't like they love you up there either.
That's I mean, that is very true. I've always said, you know, I had a job as the national correspondent at BuzzFeed. So I would go to whatever Black tragedy happened from 2014 to 2017. So that's the Mike Brown in Ferguson. That's Freddie Gray in Baltimore. That's the Emmanuel Nine in Charleston. So I did all that. And part of my travels, where I learned a lot about America then, and I was like, no matter where you go, the Black people there are mad. You know what I'm saying? They're being mistreated in some sort of way. And they probably have a legitimate grievance about how shit is going there. I get that. But man, Louisiana and Mississippi and Tennessee and Florida and Georgia, they're the ones. Man, Georgia, Brian Kemp pushed some legislation that made every election in the state partisan except the 5 metro counties of Atlanta, which is, meant to confuse voters so they don't know the vote. And so, like, every state ain't doing that. They're not doing that in Maryland, where I live. You know what I'm saying? And so I get it. I'm a Southerner. I love Texas. I love this. I love Arkansas. I love parts of Louisiana. It was my dream to move my family back to Texas. Like, I wanted to do that. And because of the political climate, it was a much harder sell to my wife, And so I don't think of it as a lost cause, but I think the things are most dire there. The situation is most urgent there. And the thing about it is that if it succeeds there, then maybe it starts succeeding in some of these other states we live in, right? And so that's why I think it's so urgent to work on it now. I don't think it has to be forever. And I also don't think that all the schools are going to get it. I think it's just if it happens, it's going to get one school. And that one school may be able to, scare enough other ones to act right too.
Joel Anderson, the host of the Ringer Tailgate and Press Box podcast. Joel, this is something I know is heavy on your heart, is consistently on your heart. You've written about it in all different types of ways. There may be something coming from you soon.
I'm working on it. I'm on deadline. So I'm going to get to it.
I'm taking you away from your work for too long. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend, brother. I appreciate it.
Likewise, brother. See you then.